Hello everyone, welcome to the third episode of the English Hour. I am again with John Berk, and in today's lecture we have a very special topic that we'll discuss. What is that?
Hello guys, we're going to talk about living abroad, and I think it's going to be a good follow-up to our first and second episodes, because on the first one we just spoke off the cuff. We just wanted to share with you something that we think is special, this organic conversation that is not scripted at all. We don't look at a text, we just speak our minds. And the second one was about English, right, Hussein?
Yeah, the pros and cons of learning English. Well, in fact, we talked about the benefits of learning English and the problems that might arise if you don't do so.
Exactly, because the problems, when we discussed the benefits, it was apparent that, the lack of studying English, not doing so, would create the opposite effect of the benefit that we mentioned. So it was a long discussion. It was close to 50 minutes. We took our time. We wanted to explore every single idea that we presented to you guys. And this time, I think we're going to be more specific.
Well, we're planning for a shorter episode, but still, we don't want to put a lot of pressure on our conversation. It can drag on longer, or it can be shorter. We'll see how it goes. So, As I said, as Jean-Berc mentioned, this is a non-scripted language. This is a non-scripted talk, and it's totally 100% natural. So, it's organic, and it can go anyway.
Exactly. I think an important benefit, before we delve into the topic, an important benefit of speaking like this is the language that you're going to encounter when you're out on the street talking to a native speaker of the English language.
That is true.
If you turn on the TV, you're going to see that a lot of news anchors and reporters choose this type of language over scripted language, because especially in the American context, for example, you don't really see a lot of scripting going on. News anchors take the liberty of speaking, their own style, and reporters have to do that because the only thing they can do is just rehearse on the spot. If they're reporting about a hurricane, for example, they can't really write a long text and, rehearse it to the point of memorization. The only thing they can do is they can rehearse it just once or twice, and they're going to have to go.
Well, the thing is, you can't be 100% prepared for everything that life throws at you. There will be circumstances in which no matter how prepared you are, you will feel unprepared. And we purposefully choose to do this unscripted. And I think, as Jean-Berc mentioned, this will help you a lot. So the topic is living abroad. So in order to keep this concise and precise and to the point, we have a framework. We'll talk about the advantages, disadvantages, and the consequences of living abroad. So let's get started with the advantages of living abroad, or the pros of living abroad. So what is the first advantage of living abroad that comes to your mind, Jean-Berc, when you think about it?
Well, since what we're doing is all about language, I think it is safe to say that language is the first thing that you're going to be benefiting from if you choose to live abroad in a different country, because language is what you'll be exposed to day in and day out if you're living in a country. When you're living in Turkey, you speak your mother tongue every single day. You use it to listen to news, to watch TV series. You use it to talk to people on the phone, talk to your relatives, your friends. You text with it. You use it all the time. And it's going to be the same or very similar in a different cultural context, because people all around the world live on similar terms. They use WhatsApp. They listen to radio, not much maybe now, but
they listen to podcasts.
They listen to podcasts,
the ones that we produce.
Exactly. They watch TV, they use Netflix and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's going to be the same thing, but the language is going to be different. So it gives you the chance to learn a whole different language.
Well,
And
there is another point. So when we talk about learning a language, it's not necessarily the local language. For example, you can go to Germany, you can learn German there, but it also gives you a lot of opportunities to practice your English, because when you're in Germany, there will be people who do not speak German, and you'll talk to them or speak to them in English. And therefore, if you're in a foreign country, you get the chance to practice a number of languages, not just the local language. So living abroad can help you in many ways in that respect.
That's right. And you can also, pertinent to this point, you can also make a choice. Like if you have a clear choice in where you live abroad, an opposite situation would be if you are abroad professionally. Like you might not get to choose because you are appointed to a certain country and you're going to have to live there, and you will adapt by learning the language and learning the culture. But if you get to choose, then you can make a choice to learn the language and culture purposefully. And in that case, maybe it would be more beneficial for you to go live in the United Kingdom or the United States or any country where English is spoken natively. But it is a very important point that you have just made, that you can go anywhere in the world and you will communicate with people using English. That's going to happen. That has to happen.
Well, as we mentioned in the previous episode, English is the lingua franca of the world at this point, so it will definitely help you, and you'll definitely get a chance to practice it wherever you go. Well, I'd like to move on to the next point. Since we're trying to keep this concise, I'll just move on to the next one, or I'll force ourselves to move on to the next one. The second point we'd like to explore is that when you live abroad, you are exposed to a totally new culture and new ways of human interaction. So the interaction patterns, the traditions and customs that take place in a foreign country will be very different from yours, and it might cause some sort of homesickness, or it might cause some sort of alienation if you're not integrated well into that society. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, when we talk about opening our minds to new ways of thinking, I'm reminded of a specific experience that I had while working in the United States, and it was about private space. I realized after a few weeks and definitely after a few months of living there that people viewed their own and each other's private space differently. They had, I think I can say that they had a larger private space, because when you're on the street, for example, when you're on the train, on the bus, people tend to avoid each other more than they do in Turkey, for example. It's like you see people avoiding to look at each other, for example, avoiding looking at each other. You see people getting away from each other. Like if somebody's trying to move, everybody gives way.
I've got to tell you something here. Well, sorry for the interruption.
No problem.
Then, based on what you say and based on my experiences, the public transportation in Istanbul would seem unbelievable or catastrophic to an American citizen, because I guess they would not fathom the idea of just being so close to each other and just crammed into a bus or a subway. That's very extraordinary by their standards.
I think you're right. And the thing is, for example, in Japan, I have never been to Japan, so I can't speak based on experience, but I think to make my point, I can just allude to it. In Japan, you see people crammed into trains. The train cars containing, I think, more people, maybe double the people that they do in Turkey. It's like you can't even take a step. It's so crowded. But you see them all looking away from each other and not really care what each other is doing. Like the point that I'm trying to make is they mind their own business.
Yeah, but that's also kind of sad.
It kind of, yeah, it's not an advantage. It's just something that is different. It's like private space is interpreted differently in Japan, in the United States, in Turkey. It's like when you mind your own business, it also means that you don't necessarily care much about what others are doing.
Yeah.
And that has pros and cons. One pro that I can think of, one benefit, is that everybody is focused more on what they're doing. And this undivided attention is, I think, good for performance. For example, if you're performing if you're playing a guitar in front of people,
yeah,
and you don't really care what anybody else is doing, and you're totally in the zone, and you can get that experience if your world is defined in a way that, it's normal for you to say, okay, everybody just minds their own business, nobody really cares about this, I care about this, so I'm going to do this. So it takes some pressure off of you psychologically.
But I think there is also the possibility that that person wants attention. So if you're a street performer, well, you might think, we live in an individualistic society, no one will care about me, and I can be myself, I don't have to be embarrassed or shy. But then I guess in the first place, you want that attention, even though you know that you live in a society where people keep a certain distance from each other, and you use that to encourage yourself to take certain steps. Eventually, you want that society, those group of people, to come towards you, to show some sort of affection or interest, and that will motivate you further.
Yeah, I think 2 points that I'm going to make. One is the person who wants attention, in this case a street performer, I think they want the attention directed towards what they're playing, but not necessarily how they're playing. I think the unwanted attention is on how they're doing it, and there is some pressure that goes on with that. It's like if you fail, you kind of feel like you have something to apologize for, whereas actually you really don't.
Yeah.
It's like you're trying to do something and it might work, it might not work. It's like being a little bit more uninterrupted. Like the performance can be smoother because you're not worried about what anybody else is thinking. Like, how am I being seen? How am I being perceived? But the real advantage of a maybe closer knit society where people care more about each other and what they do, what another person is doing, is that when times are bad, they really band together. They come together in a way that this other type of society where private space is interpreted differently may not be able to.
Well, I have some very specific examples from recent past. So, in the US, every year there are hurricanes that kill a lot of people, that uproot trees and devastate buildings and places, towns, or even entire cities. So, a couple months ago, I read news stories where store owners would triple or quadruple the water prices, the gas prices, and everything else in areas that were stricken by the hurricane. To me, that was unbelievable. So if something like that happened here, if someone was trying to take advantage of that, that would be totally unacceptable. But I saw a lot of ads, a lot of even national brands in the US, such as Best Buy, I think, they were selling bottled water for 4 times the price. And that was quite a shock.
Exactly. So as you can see, guys, this type of cultural exposure, this, being abroad, living abroad, seeing people from different nationalities think about these things, allows us to have, these views, these comparisons with our own culture. So if we had never been to the United States or the United Kingdom, then we would have never been able to make this type of comparison. So I think it is, it just speaks to the importance of living abroad.
And also, living abroad isn't always rosy. It's not always glamorous. It has its downsides.
Every country and every society has their own set of problems.
Yeah, for example, the one thing that I really miss, apart from my family and friends, when I'm abroad, is Turkish food.
Mm-hmm.
I really miss it. For example, when I was in Britain, I didn't like the food because they got fish and chips. To me, that's second-class meal, and I had to look for. I'm not against local cuisines. I like it. I try it whenever I can, but eventually, my point of view is that I like Turkish food much more. And when I'm abroad, it's some of the things that I really miss. And another thing, especially if you live in more of an individualistic society, such as the Western countries, you might feel lonely at times, or you might feel a lack of social support. Those are the problems that I've personally experienced or observed.
That's right. So just as larger private space might take pressure and stress off of you, especially social stress, it also decreases social interaction to a certain degree. You feel like people around you are not as close to you as, maybe in Turkey or maybe in another close-knit society where people are closer together. So it is the very same thing that is different, because this is different in Turkey and in the United States or in other country. The very same thing can both be a con and a pro, can both be a benefit and a disadvantage. So I think the last point that you made about missing Turkish food is about appreciating your own culture more, because when you go live abroad and you see what's going on over there and you start making comparisons, you realize that your own culture in certain ways is superior. In certain ways, there are certain advantages to the way you look at the world, to the way you do things. So it makes you appreciate what you have back at home. And that also is an important feeling to have this type of ownership of your own culture and nationality, because this is just normal.
That is true. So it helps you embrace your own culture, your own values. It makes you aware of differences and similarities, because cultures can differ or cultures can resemble each other in many ways, and living abroad can help you broaden your perspective and make those connections. I think we are a little above our target duration, but I think we're not way above our target duration. And I think we did a good job of summarizing the things that we wanted to summarize.
I agree. I think we touched on some important points, some real points.
Yeah, let's give an outline and wrap things up.
Let's do that. I think we started out with language.
Yeah.
And this is what we start out with, and this is what we come back to every single time. Because language is really an integral part of life.
I think language is at the core of our identity.
I think language is able, more than anything else in the world, to liberate a human being. It really opens up your mind to new possibilities and also your heart. And living abroad is one way you can do that. You can achieve that. So language was the first one, and the second one was
exposure and human interaction and being exposed to different ways of thinking. And finally,
we also talked about coming back and appreciating what you have back at home, appreciating your own culture and your own society. And this is through comparisons that we make. Whether we want it or not, we end up making comparisons. When you are in a new environment, you compare it to the older environment, the former environment that you were in. So you appreciate your own culture more when you go and live abroad.
That is so true. And I think that pretty much sums it up. We can call today.
Yep. That was great.
Well, we'll see you in the next episode, guys. And till then, take care.
Bye-bye.